And here we are once again, folks, the Alberti Show, coming to you directly from 98.1 FM in Thorium, Nevada. And this is the show where we talk about anything and everything. So when we start off today, I got a book. Well, actually, I had some interest in the books of Enoch. These are books that were written which do not show in your normal Bible, your St. James or your Catholic Bible, but it is in the Ethiopian Bible, which I have not been able to get a copy. But a week or so ago, I had mentioned this to a few people that I was interested in reading the books of Enoch, and I had gone online to look for them. But I was always uncomfortable buying it when somebody else is going to tell me what Enoch said. I want to figure that out for myself. Well, lo and behold, Bob Albus, one of our local, he owns a book company called Green Toad Books, and he works selling various kinds of books. He has a big collection. And he brought over 2 copies of the Book of Enoch by 2 different authors and offered to let me read them. And they look like brand new books, real high quality stuff, not the stuff I'm used to buying. And then this morning at breakfast, another fellow brought in a book about Enoch, and his book isn't written by either of the other 2 authors. So evidently there's a lot of interest in this individual out there. And I find it interesting in getting into it because he talks about things in a different way than the normal Bible talks about it. And I believe some of his writings were actually before. And he talks about Adam and Eve. There's stuff in there that just, if you haven't gotten a copy of the Book of Enoch and you want to read it, I would go to the library and ask them to order it. The 3 people ask for a book. Typically, when they get enough books being requested, they'll order it for you. And then they'll let you know that it's in. Now, I don't want to get into Enoch today, but I just wanted to mention it because I think the more we investigate our history, the more we uncover the mystery of our history. There you go. You know, when you look at it, they're finding all these buildings, not just the pyramid in Egypt, but all these other cities throughout the world, ancient cities, most of which have been abandoned and have been covered in dirt and have disappeared. Even one city they uncovered, which appears to have been covered intentionally. They find tunnels in the ground as deep as 300 feet, where they estimate 10 to 20,000 people could live. You have to ask yourself, how come it's not in the Bible? How come they don't talk about these things? And what's the mystery of it? And then they see this one black layer of dirt or charcoal or whatever it is throughout the world in the ground. And they find it by excavating different places in different countries, and it appears to be everywhere. So that's part of the mystery. And the more we learn about our past, the more weird, and to me it's weird because of what I was taught years ago about the world. And, you know, when you live in a city, you get a different perspective of the world than when you live in the country. When you live in like Manhattan or Los Angeles, you don't always see the sunrise. Many times you can see the sunset, but the sunrise is not always that visible to you. Anyway, I'm recommending, if you haven't read the books of Enoch, it's not a hard read. It's been translated into English, so you can look at it and pretty well see what he's talking about. But I'm at a point in it where he's talking about the moon and the sun and how it works. And I'm having a little difficult time getting past that because he's a little bit different than what we're being taught in schools. You know, like the moon has a 28-day cycle, and he talks about 30 days. Was it 30 days at one time? I don't know. Just interesting to read. All right, enough of that stuff. But I wanted to open up with that because of the issue of plate tectonics. Now, you know, I do a breakfast, excuse me, every Thursday morning at the museum at 7:30. And we have a group that gets together and we discuss things. And this morning, part of the discussion was about plate tectonics. Now, it's interesting because there was a scientist who a number of years ago was looking at a map, and something occurred to him that looked very familiar. And actually, that map is on a screen in front of me right now as I'm doing this show. And if you look at a flat map of the continents, you can see how they kind of fit together. And this whole issue of plate tectonics is about the fact that the upper crust of the planet is in constant motion. Now, you know, the bigger something gets, typically the slower it works. So you don't see these continents moving very quickly, but they have measured them, and they know that they do move. And if you look at the map of, not on the globe, but just look at it, a flat map, you can see where different continents fit into other continents. It's like they broke away. Well, how can that be? It can't be that they were made that way. It has to be that at one time they were together. And because of whatever happens below the Earth's crust, it's a mystery. How does this really take place? But here's one explanation that has come up. The Earth travels throughout the universe. It rotates. That's how you get day and night. The moon revolves around the Earth. And as it does, when the moon is on one side of the planet, it has a gravitational effect on the planet, on the Earth. So when it's on one side, the tides rise. When it moves on to the other side, they fall. And they rise on the other side of the planet. Now just picture this. Picture all this water in the oceans sloshing around. You know, we have high tide and low tide. The way that happens is the water is being pulled in one direction or another based on gravitational forces. We don't have to talk about centrifugal force because that's pretty much constant. So when that happens, there's a theory that the movement of the oceans has an effect on creating earthquakes and plate tectonics. But that's not the only thing. I can recall in the 70s that there was discussion about the poles, North and South Pole, and that the ice, the theory was the Earth's mantle can become unbalanced and just shift very quickly. And there may be some evidence for that. They have found woolly mammoths preserved with even blood still there after all this time. And with food, flowers in their belly still not digested. How does that happen? How did they get frozen so quick? Big mystery. And science can have all these theories they want to have, but because it's in the background, there is no way to just do it. It would be nice if we could have like a TV screen and we could have a dial on that screen as to how many years in the past we could dial in to look and see what happened. Anyway, so plate tectonics is everything in the planet is in motion. As a matter of fact, you may not even know that the dirt outside your house is in motion. But in areas in the planet where they have rocky soil, it's typical that if you removed all the rocks on the surface, over a period of time, more rocks would appear. And that's because the soil is always in motion. You may not feel it, you may not see it, but it's always moving to some effect, small as it may be. And so what happens is the larger parts, the bigger rocks, have a tendency to move to the surface. And if you're curious about that, if you take a bag of Cheetos and you eat the top layer of those Cheetos, now you're getting to small pieces. So you take that bag and you just rattle it, shake it pretty good, and all the big pieces wind up at the top that were left in the lower portion of the bag. Not much different when it comes to soil. Now, I have to confess, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an archaeologist, I'm not a geologist. I'm just a guy who sits in front of a TV and watches shows and reads books and educates myself about these things. And you don't have to trust anything I say, but I tell you these things hoping that there's some people out there that will go and read. And this morning at the breakfast, as part of this discussion of plate tectonics and how the crust moves and all these other things, it was disclosed that one of the runways in Las Vegas had to change the number of the runway. Now, you know, the number of runways based on their orientation on direction. You know, runway 21 east or whatever they want to call it. So they had to change the number, and I don't recall if it was from 21 to 22 or from 22 to 21, but it was changed. And this is in the past year. And why is that? Because the Earth is a dynamic thing, and things are always happening. And evidently, magnetic north has shifted enough where they felt they needed to adjust the number of the runway. So when you're landing or you're looking for the runway, and you've got your compass going and your electronic compass, whatever you're using, GPS, you'll at least be able to find it. You know, they do have occasionally an airplane land at the wrong airport even. I guess you don't work for that airline anymore when that happens. I don't know. So the other thing that we did talk about, and just one more thing, there was a time when I started the Gold Prospecting Club here in Peru. And you always learn about geology because this is all about rocks. The rock hounds, they have to know about geology. And one of the things I learned was how gold was created in California and Nevada. And it's kind of interesting because this plate tectonics thing, the plate coming in from the west, meeting the California coast, that plate is diving underneath the California plate. So what you have in California is when you're looking for gold, the gold is in cracks that run north and south, pretty much, generally. And it's that way because these layers of dirt, land if you will, tend to collapse and fold, kind of like an accordion would. But in Nevada, that's not necessarily the case. Here, when you go to look for gold, it's really everywhere. And a lot of it is fine gold. Well, you'll get nuggets, and occasionally you get a giant nugget. Somebody finds one. I've seen one from Round Mountain that they came up with. But for the most part, they're getting very small amounts of gold per bucket load in a bucket loader, or if you want to use a yard as a measurement. And then they have to process it to get the gold out. They get a lot of gold because it's a huge mine. You should go out and see it if you ever get up to Round Mountain with the Tonopah. I think it's Thursday when you go up there, and that's when they're setting off explosions so that they can dig the dirt, as opposed to dishing the dirt. And so in Nevada, It's different. In Nevada, we used to have volcanic action. Now, they had some in California, but there was a lot more of it in Nevada. And you would have hot water geysers bringing hot water from the under the ground up to the surface. And with it would come very small amounts of gold. And the water would evaporate, and eventually you wound up with gold on the surface or near the surface, which is the way Round Mountain and those other mines up in the northern Nevada have to mine. Even in the Johnny mine, if you go there to look, unless you're actually digging quartz, if there's an area where you're on the surface, you usually find kind of small, fine gold. So enough of this. Go out there and go gold prospecting. You know, people tell me there's nothing to do here in Nye County. My God, you could go out every weekend and go gold prospecting. You may not become a millionaire, but what a great time to be outdoors. And the Nye Gold Seekers had merged with the Rock Hounds. And so now, if you want to go out, there's a way you can do it just by joining the organization. So it's kind of fun. You learn all about how they do that. And if you really want to learn about it, you can watch a couple of gold shows on television. Bering Sea Gold, Gold Rush. Boy, are they ever not only entertaining, but you can see how it's different in the different ways that people mine for gold. Okay, I had a conversation with our county manager, and it was about the topic of nuclear energy, or energy in general. And, you know, you hear all this about solar panels and wind power. You should see some of the pictures of wind power turbines where they've collapsed and caught fire. It's pretty impressive. And they don't work if there's no wind. And solar doesn't work, technically, if there's no sun. So they try to store that energy so you can draw it back out in the evening or when there's no wind. But even that presents a problem. How big a battery do you need, or how big an energy system do you need to store that energy? Think about how much energy is used just in your house alone, and add that up to all the houses and businesses throughout the country. It's a huge number. So they did come up with nuclear power, and that was in the 1950s. Then they were familiar with nuclear power, having developed the atom bomb and how all that worked. But there was a competing technology with instead of uranium 238 or 35, they wanted to look at thorium as well. They were advocates for thorium. Now, whatever people tell you about nuclear power, there were two things. Well, actually, it may be a couple more. First, it runs all the time, except when they have to shut down to change the fuel rods. And those fuel rods have to be changed when they're 5% used. When there's 95% energy still left in those rods, they have to be changed. So they have to shut down the power plant in order to do that. Plus, it runs at very high pressures. There's high pressure water in those nuclear reactors. And you know, when you get it to a high temperature, where it's like superheated water, and it can turn to steam instantaneously. And if there's ever a problem where that's going to happen, that's why those reactor buildings have 4-foot thick concrete, fully reinforced walls to contain the explosion. Yes, that is possible. So there was a competing technology, and it was called thorium. Now, thorium, unlike uranium, is much more plentiful in the surface of the planet. As a matter of fact, when they actually mine rare earth minerals, thorium is a waste product. They just set it aside. It's junk. But if you built thorium reactors, that waste product would be a profit center for the mining of rare earth minerals, and it would be better for the economy and for us as citizens. You should really go up on YouTube or on the internet and look up the question of thorium. And I can tell you, when you look, that there's a number of entities that are actually looking at thorium and developing and designing thorium reactors. I know in Australia, there's a company called Thorcon Industries, Thorcon Power. And they actually have the plans already in place to build that first reactor for themselves. Then there's a company called Motex, M-O-L-T-E-X Energy, or Copenhagen Economics, or Seaboard, or Terrestrial Energy. And then there's one, I don't know how to pronounce this one, F-L-I-B-E Energy, Flibe Energy, I don't know. I don't know where they came up with that. And the real proponent for thorium in the United States, to the best of my knowledge, is a fellow named Kirk Sorensen. So I went to our county manager and I suggested that maybe we in Nye County should be looking at thorium development and its benefits to us. It's kind of sad to me that I provided the county manager with information and websites to look at on the internet to learn and understand about thorium, to talk to the commissioners about it. I mean, if I talk to the commissioners, they're not going to listen. I'm already blacklisted, so they're nice to me, but I'm not going anywhere with the government here in my county other than to talk about it. All right, so one of the things about thorium, a nuclear reactor for it, is you can't make weapons-grade plutonium in any kind of quantity. You can in the current reactors that they have now, but not with thorium. It works differently. And a thorium reactor, from all of my understanding, is an automatic shutdown if something goes wrong. Maybe the cooling water stops working or something. It's an automatic fail-safe. It's designed into the way it generates power. And you don't have to throw a switch. You don't have to, it just, the reactor shuts down. What a nice safety feature. And it doesn't run at the high pressures that the current nuclear power reactors work at. And believe me, a reactor built in thorium, according to Kirk Sorensen, those reactors, in his opinion, can run continuously. They don't have to be shut down. They can actually feed the thorium into the machine while it's running. You don't have to shut the reactor down. So maybe the environmentalists don't like nuclear power, but according to Kirk Sorensen, the reactor design that he's working with will use thorium down to the point where you only have to store 10% of the thorium as opposed to 95% of the uranium once it's done being used. We should be thinking about this, folks. And you should talk to your county manager and your county commissioners just exactly why you would like to see it here. Be knowledgeable. Because let me tell you what, they're building a $4 million doghouse, and that's not the total cost, because the operating cost is going to come in and above that. And with the way the Joker in Washington is managing the economy and the country, that $4 million tab may wind up being 10 million. I don't know. We're in some serious price escalations here. Just go down to Home Depot and look at the price of OSB board. I mean, I can't believe where the prices are going. Even a 2x4, 8 foot, almost $5. I can remember when I used to shop for the best price. Now I just shop to hope that they have it. I have a picture of the local Walmart store here. Empty shelves. Not just empty shelves, the whole aisle was empty. And they'll tell you, well, we're getting it, it's coming. They're redesigning the store. But I've never seen it like this. And there was a time when Fry's Electronics in Vegas started having empty shelves. I took pictures and I put them up on my website because I felt that Fry's was losing it. They were going to go out of business. And everybody told me, no, we're still buying from Fry's. Well, guess what? A year or so later, boom, they closed the doors, not just on the Vegas property, but on all of their stores. People were buying from Amazon and from other online stores. And what could you do? You're stuck. Everybody was buying online. They couldn't compete with that. Even their online store wasn't that great a store. For my money, it was very poorly designed. But so I mourn, along with my friend Joe Markley, I mourn the loss of Fry's. I like to go in and touch what I'm going to buy. I want to see it operating so I know what I'm getting. And believe me, you don't know that anymore. There are so many returns coming back to some of these shipping operations where you buy product that they're then reselling them by the box load. And the people, I had a conversation with somebody over the weekend, and it turns out that they don't know what's going to be in the box. They buy a box and they find out what they're getting when it comes in. And then it's their job to sell it. But the prices are so good that they can't resist. I couldn't resist. If I knew where to do that, I'd probably be doing it too. So going back, thorium is the way to go, in my opinion. And I believe that one day, there was a scientist at Brookhaven National Laboratory, where I used to live nearby there, and another one at MIT. Two of these guys had very interesting things to talk about. The first one was that he believed that eventually, instead of large nuclear power plants, when they figured out how to make a power plant that was about the size of an outdoor air conditioning or heat pump, you could build that and that would be your power supply. You wouldn't have solar power, you would just use that. Then there was another guy. This guy was really interesting. I loved reading about him. He was at MIT, and his job at MIT was to think, to look into the future, to try and predict where science was taking us. And this was his idea. He said everything is made up of atoms. Every molecule is made up of atoms. So atoms were his basic material, if you will. And the interesting thing about this was, I don't think they've ever figured out how to save atoms in a box. You know, you can go out and you can buy sugar in a box, you can buy soup in a can, you can buy cereal in a box, but those are all molecules. He said he predicted that in the future, we would figure out how to just have atoms, and that we could use computer technology to cause those atoms to become things, food, buildings. And he gave this kind of scenario. Let's say you have a family of 4, and you've got 4 bedrooms plus the master bedroom, and at night everybody goes to sleep. All you need is the bedrooms. So you set your computer to shut down the other parts of the building, go back to being atoms. And before anybody wakes up in the morning, or if somebody wakes up, it would reconstruct whatever room they needed to go to, the toilet, the kitchen, whatever, and that would become part of the house again. And as you got older and you didn't need that big house, you could restructure the program so the atoms would structure into a smaller facility that you'd feel comfortable with. And if you wanted it bigger because you were going to have a party, as long as you got enough atoms in the box, here it comes. And people say, oh, how ridiculous, how that's not possible. But if I told you that in 20 years after inkjet printers came out and became really popular, maybe 25 years, that somebody would come along and say to themselves, you know what? When I'm printing something, it's just one layer, but I can print it with all the spaces and everything and make a picture. I can make a gear. And somebody, God knows where this guy's brain was, he said, what if I could just lift up the print head just 1/1000th of an inch? And instead of printing with ink, I could print with plastic. I could just heat the plastic up like they do in an injection molding machine. And I could just have that print head put a little layer of plastic above the first one. And I could tell it when to put it and when not to put it. And eventually, as that print head kept rising above what I'm making, instead of printing a picture, it would be printing an item. I have 2 of those at my house, by the way. Not printed items. I have more of those, but I have 2 3D printers. Who would have thought that by the year 2020, people could have that in their house? When Gene Roddenberry had Star Trek and they had the replicator, what do you think they replicated from? Could it be atoms? Could it be that they had a store of just basic atoms as the raw material? And from that, they could create anything because of a computer program? Does that sound kind of wild? Yeah, it does. But who says that's wild if 100 years from now it exists? I mean, I can make little tool parts. I can make little gears and stuff. You couldn't make some of this stuff because when it's made this way with a 3D printer, it's working when you take it out of the production. And you can actually make things that there's no other way to make them. Airplane parts. Some of the parts on the spaceships that they're sending out now, some of those parts have been 3D printed already, so it's really in the works. And if I told you that I believe, you know, when they first came out with the vacuum cleaner, you got to see pictures of what that looked like. Man, it was a monstrosity. But over the years, they have fine-tuned the designs. So now what you have, you can actually see the dirt in a clear plastic container. It's easy to empty out. You don't need a bag. And it's just a totally different in appearance than the original vacuum cleaner. And that's true of the washing machine, the radar. I was in the Air Force. I was a crew chief. And the other crew chiefs in the wintertime, when they were running the radar, would stand in front of the airplane and the radar would actually keep them warm. That's how microwaves started. And the original microwaves were called radar ranges. Now they're just called microwaves. But all of this starts from one little simple idea and moves forward. And I tell you about this because I think thorium is one of those ideas that's time has come. And if you don't like war and you like lower cost electricity and everything we have these days runs on energy of some type, if you think this will never happen, you're probably wrong. Because anything our brain can think of is probably going to happen someday. I don't know that I'll see it in my lifetime. But who knows? Maybe science will figure out how to let me live to 150. I mean, so far so good. I'm still here. I'm losing a lot of friends, but I'm still here. Okay, so do yourself a favor and look it up. And you know what? And come to our breakfast. Every Thursday morning, you're going to find out you learn things there you don't hear anyplace else. One of the subjects we had this morning was about all this phishing and the phone calls we're getting that are scammers. We got scammed on a call. So we talked about how all this works this morning and how to deal with it. And one of the things one of the guys brought up was that when you get what you think is a scam call, if you hit the hashtag or pound sign 3 times really fast, that used to be that it would screw up their ability to make a call for about 20 minutes. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's darn sure worth a try, and it was an interesting comment to listen to. But we did have a conversation about how do you recognize a scam call? Let me give you an example. You know, you get a call periodically. They want you to contribute to the Policemen's Benevolent Association or firefighters or the tunnel project, you know, and it tears your heart out sometimes to know that as much money as we put in through our taxes with things like this, we still get calls to contribute. So the solution that everybody came to at breakfast this morning was this: don't. No matter what you think or what you hear, if they tell you you just won Publishers Clearinghouse and in order to unlock the account, you have to send them $200 in a gift card, think again. Probably not going to happen. And how do I know this? Because we already saw that at our house. If anything, tell them you want their phone number so you can call them back because you're busy feeding the baby or something like that. Or you have to leave on an errand, and when you come back, you'll call them back. You find out you'll never be able to call anybody back. And when these people call these days, they're really slick. They'll know your last 4 digits of your social security number, your street address, your phone, all kinds of personal information about you that they can garner easily. But the real kicker is when they say, well, we need your PIN number. That's when you give them a fake PIN number and see what happens. Frankly, when we had this fishing expedition with this guy about Publishers Clearinghouse, I talked with that guy on and off for a week. We just strung him along. And you know what? He never quit. He just kept coming back for more. I don't know what he thought he was going to get. At one point, he wanted $200. Then it was $3,000. Then he was all over the place. And he would call us back and he would forget he had talked to us before. Probably because he had an automatic dialer operating, so he had no way to tell who he was calling. But at the end of a week, we let him know that we knew it was a scam and it was a lot of fun screwing around with him. And it's time for him to move on to somebody else. And you know, even after that, he called us. I don't know how all that works behind the scenes where these guys get their moxie, but they're good. I mean, they're good in sales. Okay, so that was one of the other discussions. By the way, I don't know if any of you have gone to the swap meet at the VFW lately. I can remember I went there a long time ago, and we actually had a booth, and it was very sparsely attended, and there weren't that many booths open. But when I went last weekend, it was packed with booths. In my estimation, and I didn't count them, there must have been close to 100 booths. And you can buy ammunition there. There are guns that you can buy. You still have to follow gun laws, but they were there. There were people that do artistry items. There's stuff that you could buy. I'll give you an example. You know these little square antennas they sell in the store for $20? And it's to get digital TV locally over the airwaves. I bought one. And I went home to try it out to see how well it worked. Because if it worked, I was going to buy a couple more. And it was really great. I had great reception with it. So I went back down, and by the way, they're nice and flat, so you can just stick them on a wall, stick them behind your TV set. I mean, just any place you want to put it. So I went back there, and I told the guy that the one I bought was okay, and I'd like to buy 3 more. I'm sorry, I just told him I would like to buy another 1 or 2. Does he have any more? He said, well, I got a box of them. And he went and looked, and he said, well, these are not identical to the one you bought. They have a separate power supply, but I'll sell them to you for $1.50 each. So I bought 3 of them. I mean, at $1.50. And he had other good stuff. I bought some internet video cameras. And I bought 1 camera was $10. And I bought 3 more at $1 each. All good working cameras. I tested them all out when I got home. So there's that kind of buying. And then you'll find that there were people there with tools, lots of tools. And the tools are very reasonably priced. I actually bought a couple of toolboxes loaded with tools and parts inside them, like $15. And they weren't that plastic crap that you see at Harbor Freight. These were good metal toolbox. One was a Craftsman. It pays to go to the swap meet and patronize those guys that are there. Many of them are veterans. Many just live here for them. And to my way of thinking, with the prices in the stores these days, we're fortunate that we have that kind of ability to buy stuff here. I go to Goodwill too. And I like to buy stuff at Goodwill. You know why? I go through there and I look at what they have. And sometimes I didn't even know that thing existed and would never have thought to even look for it. I'll give you a couple of examples. I paid $9 for a vacuum cleaner there. This vacuum cleaner I bought because it said dog hair. This vacuum cleaner was supposed to be good with dog hair. Now, we used to have 2 German short-haired pointers. And I'll tell you, vacuuming the house once a week, I would have to empty out the canister in our vacuum 5 to 7 times. And eventually, if you forgot to empty it out, the vacuum motor would overheat and it would shut off until you fixed everything. So I looked at that and I thought, a vacuum cleaner made for dog hair? Oh, for $9, I got to try that. I mean, it turned on, but you never know if it's going to work till you take it home. I am ecstatic about that particular vacuum cleaner. And while I was there, I bought a second one. This one was self-propelled. I haven't really played with it yet. It's been a couple of weeks. I can't take it back. But if I don't like it, I'll probably put it in a garage sale for $15. The vacuum is probably a $250 vacuum. And we bought some other stuff there. Let me tell you a little gadget I saw. It's like a T-square, but it was for hanging picture frames so that you would know where to put the nail and how to make it level. You ever put up your own picture? You got a level, you're leveling out the screen. You want to make sure it's vertically correct. You want to know where to put the nail. You're figuring it all out. This little gadget did it all. You actually knew where to put the nail. But once you put the nail in, the rest of it was easy. And if you had to put two nails in to keep it level, fine. Now, I've hung a lot of pictures in my day, and it's a real pain in the neck. I'm always asking the wife to stand behind me and say, well, how's this look? How's that look? No, I don't have to do that anymore. And I bought that for $2. And they have all kinds of, my son loves to shop there also. And I see people I know shopping there. So and then there's building 160 up on the north end of town. My God, she's got some great furniture in there. We bought a table there, a big square, beautiful, beautiful table. We paid $300, including the chairs. This was, and actually I had seen this table someplace else only a week before. And when we saw it there, at $300, that was a bargain. And Rose, who owns building 160, that's off Blosser Road and 160. What a great lady to do business with. And she has all kinds. She's got refrigerators, pictures, whatever she could get her hands on. I remember seeing photographic equipment that you would do if you were a photographer and you were doing pictures and photography and studio work, the whole setup, everything. And I don't know what she was asking for it, but I can tell you that she's very reasonable. Because if she keeps it there, she doesn't make any money. So take an opportunity, go shop at these bargain places. I knew people in California. I knew the kind of money they were making, and they still shopped at the bargain places. Even here in Pahrump, they do that. A friend of mine needed a new refrigerator, but he didn't want to go to Home Depot to buy a new one. So he shopped around for a used refrigerator. Bingo. And, you know, refrigerators are a self-contained unit. They should last almost forever. The refrigerator in my house, we bought that in easily 1984. And we still have it. And it still works great. Why would I buy another one? We know people who bought new modern refrigerators within the last couple of years, and they crapped out on them, and they bought another one because it crapped out. One of our friends actually, their refrigerator, when it crapped out, they could actually call China to talk to somebody through the refrigerator on how to fix it. Can't make that stuff up, folks. The world is changing, and we are learning more and more about it. And some of the things I've talked to you about today, they're just the beginning. Fraud is rampant. Spying on you is rampant. There is I believe it's a 7-Eleven store. I read about it the other day. They have so many cameras in the ceiling. What they're doing is they're following where people go in the store and how long they stay at their different items that they're selling. And what that does is that helps them focus on things people are interested in buying. I mean, why carry something on the shelf that nobody wants to buy? So they have these cameras, and they actually can count how many people are actually in the store at one time. And based on that, I want to take you back a little bit. There was a time when I used to go into Smith's store here in Pahrump, and they had a screen up that showed a number. There were actually 3 numbers in a circle. So one circle had a number, and the other 2 had a number. The circle in the middle was current. The first circle was growth, and the second one was departures. It was something close to that. And what they had is they were reading infrared heat signatures from the people in the store. Now, they weren't reading their ID or anything else, but they could count how many people were in the store, and they could project how many checkout operators they had to have so you didn't have to wait long in line. And I can tell you, Now, I'm not talking out of school here because I asked about it when I saw all the numbers. I asked, what are those numbers on the screen? And because of that, they could project 5 minutes in advance how many people they would need, they would have coming to the checkout, and how many checkers they'd have to have working. So somebody would come up and open up a checker so that that wouldn't back up the other line. And I always used to marvel that when I went to Smith's, they were so fast. I never had more than 2 or 3 people on the line, and that was it. I would go to Walmart, and my God, I'd be waiting 20 minutes. Now, some of that has changed these days because now you have automatic checkout. But even that is taking some changes because if you put something in a cart, there are some stores that can actually tell that you took something and put it in the cart and it adds it to your bill. So when you get ready to check out, if you haven't put anything back, you're all ready to go. It's amazing. And you know, I never thought to look recently to see if those numbers were still in the ceiling at Smith's. I think the next time I go there, I'm going to go there tonight after the show, and I'm going to look. But what I'm telling you here is factual about how they did that. And they weren't the only store. But it was interesting to note that now they had this one store, they had a picture of it in the newspaper. I think it was in the Las Vegas Sun. I have a copy of that here. Let me see if it's in the Sun. I think they were, you know, I read liberal rags in addition to conservative rags. Because if you don't read, you don't know. And don't count on the words. You have to actually see pictures. Let's see if it's in this one. Maybe it was someplace else in the newspaper. I have to see. Okay, yeah, it was someplace else in the newspaper. All right, well, I just about, I'm really sorry that I don't have that here so I could show it on the screen. Well, are you ready for what they're teaching your kids? They're not teaching my kids anymore because my kids are all grown up. But they're teaching your kids. And do you know what they're teaching them? Who decides what they should teach your children? You know, I can go back to the 1970s when I was just starting up in politics in California. I had moved there from New York, where I was actually politically there. And I had somebody tell me that the more women went to work, the more there would have to be childcare. And that eventually the government would want to take care of your children from cradle to grave. Now, maybe at that time I thought, yeah, I could see that maybe you have to have childcare during the day. But if you watch the progression over the last 50 years, it's amazing. You don't know what they're teaching your kids. If you saw it, you might be very upset. I always thought the job of school was to expand their brain, to understand mathematics, to understand history, to learn to read well, to learn to communicate in print or to write. Now, some people are complaining they don't like the fact that they're not teaching script anymore, but to me, printing is much easier to read than it is when you have script. And I'm not upset about that. But you better check and see what they're teaching your kids. Because I went to one of the school board meetings here recently in Pahrump, in Nye County, Pahrump. And it was one of the most bland meetings I have ever attended. As a matter of fact, I don't know what the hell they're thinking, but the superintendent had a portion of the meeting where he was instructing or testing the board members as to how to do their job. Now, I want to tell you something. If I'm a board member, You don't have to be the employee telling me how to do my job. But that's exactly this. And they were doing this at the board meeting, while we as the audience could watch. It was at that point that Dwight Hunter and I left. Dwight was with me. Now, I don't want to be negative about this. I always like to approach things in a positive way, but I also like to dig in and learn how things work. Now, I was a school board member in New York for 1.5 terms, not quite a half term at the end, not because they threw me out, but after 3 years, I had decided to move to California, and I told everybody I was moving. And they put a petition in with my name to be on the ballot, and I got elected. Even after I told everybody, don't vote for me, I'm not staying, I'm out of here. And they still vote. But I know what goes on behind the scenes in school. And I was a substitute teacher here for 3 years. I could see the difference between a good quality instructor who knew how to manage their class and a goofball. And there are both in school. And I can tell you this, when I was in New York on that school board, everybody told us, oh, you can't get anything done. All these things you plan to do, you can't because they've got a union and they run the school. And I thought to myself, well, I got to see what happens here. I want to give it a shot. So I ran against the president of the school board at that time and the woman who was head of the Retired People's Association, both powerful people in the town. And everybody told me, Andy, don't run against them. You'll get crucified. And Andy wasn't that smart. He just knew that neither one of them should be on that school board anymore. One was the school president. So I filed to run against the two of them. And on election night, I can remember you can't be in the voting area, but you could be outside 100 feet away so that you're there. And that night, after they counted the votes, I wound up with half the votes. And they split the other half between them. So I had a 50% margin out of 3 people. So I spent 3 years of my life as a volunteer school board member, but we found a way to work with the union to improve the quality of teachers in our school. And it wasn't giving them more money. Everybody says we don't pay enough. But let me tell you how that works, folks. When they tell you we have to pay teachers more money, yeah, maybe they do. But maybe teachers need to work a full year. Because when you get summer off and you say you're not making enough money, you had enough money to take 90 days off and still survive. And what they can do, their annual salary, even only for 9 months, they can break it up into a 12-month pay schedule so you're getting a paycheck every month. But that's not the issue. When they tell you that the union is obstructing getting good quality education, I'm not buying it. I will never buy it because our experience at the William Floyd School District in Brookhaven, UFSD 32, was that we worked with the union because we knew what they needed and they knew what we wanted. And I can tell you, go to the next school board meeting, I'm going to be there, and let's see what we come up with. So this is Andy Alberti. Today is the day before. Lou will be doing a show called Combat Correspondence on Friday, I believe at 4:30. Tune him in. Great show. Lou knows his stuff. And with that, I'm Andy Alberti. The station is 98.1 FM, and I am out of here.